The young and the restless spoilers shock. In the dark underbelly of the conspiracy that had gripped their lives, Nick had been relentlessly digging into the mystery behind the disappearance of Phyllis and Sharon. Every clue he uncovered deepened the abyss of uncertainty surrounding their fate, and the only names that surfaced in whispered rumors were Michael and Victor, figures whose dangerous reputations cast long shadows over every lead. For Nick, the stakes had never been higher. Every moment of investigation was a tightrope walk over an ever-widening chasm of peril. Late one night, while combing through intercepted communications and covert recordings, Nick's determination crystallized into a searing conviction. The clandestine whispers of guilt and deceit finally coalesced in his mind, pointing squarely to Michael as the mastermind behind the entire kidnapping plot. Michael, it appeared, had been artfully masquerading as an innocent bystander, deflecting blame and spreading false reassurances that he had no involvement in Phyllis's abduction. But Nick had listened, really listened, to every incriminating word in their hushed conversation. The truth, raw and undeniable, blazed in his ears. There was no room for doubt now. Michael's carefully constructed facade was nothing more than a veil concealing his true nature. Fury surged through Nick's veins, a molten mix of betrayal and a desperate need for retribution. In that fraught moment, his thoughts raced to the only solution he could fathom. If Michael was indeed the architect of this treachery, then eliminating him would be the only way to balance the scales of justice. With his heart pounding like a war drum, Nick's trembling hand reached for the gun he had kept hidden, a cold, hard symbol of the lengths he was willing to go to avenge his loved ones. In his eyes, Michael's death was not merely a punishment, it was the key to unlocking the whereabouts of Sharon and Phyllis. Without Michael, there would be no more lies, no more misdirection, and perhaps, finally, the truth about their imprisonment would be revealed. Before Nick could bring the weapon to bear, a sudden presence interrupted the crescendo of his vengeful resolve. Chance, a voice of reason amidst the chaos, stepped forward with urgency. His tone was both stern and laced with warning as he placed a steady hand on Nick's arm, halting him in his tracks. "Nick, don't do this," Chance implored, his eyes scanning the charged atmosphere. "If you pull that trigger on a misguided impulse, you won't just be taking Michael's life, you'll be condemning yourself to a prison cell, and worse, you'll lose any chance of rescuing Sharon and Phyllis. We can't afford to let anger blind us now." For a long, agonizing moment, the world seemed to pause. The weight of Chance's words hung in the air, mingling with the palpable tension. Nick's face contorted with inner turmoil. Every fiber of his being screamed for justice and vengeance, yet he knew deep down that reckless violence would only compound the tragedy. With an exasperated sigh, his eyes flashed with a storm of emotions, rage, despair, and the bitter taste of betrayal. Though his hand still gripped the cold metal of the gun, Nick was forced to wrest control from his raw impulse and heed the warning. He swallowed his fury, knowing that if Michael died now, not only would the truth about Sharon and Phyllis remain shrouded in darkness, but the very foundation of his investigation would crumble into chaos. Across the room, Michael's reaction was immediate and palpable. The moment he caught sight of Nick's intense, unyielding gaze, a wave of terror washed over him. His eyes widened as he began to understand the gravity of the situation, a cold realization that his carefully laid plans were now hanging by a thread. The threatening look in Nick's eyes spoke volumes. It was a silent promise of retribution, a storm about to break. In that charged instant, Michael's mind was gripped by thoughts of his own mortality. Every instinct screamed for him to retreat, to dissolve into the shadows before Nick's wrath could be unleashed. But it was too late. The seeds of doubt and fear had already been sown in his heart. Nick's internal battle raged on, the memories of those he had lost and the desperation to reclaim every stolen moment with Phyllis and Sharon fueling the tumult inside him. He recalled the faces of his loved ones, the hope in Sharon's eyes before the darkness descended, the quiet strength Phyllis once carried amidst adversity, and wondered if his path to vengeance might ultimately sever the very bonds he sought to protect. In that perilous moment, the room was charged with the electricity of impending violence, yet it was also laden with the silent, agonizing plea for redemption. Chance's words echoed again, a steady reminder in the midst of the storm. "This isn't just about punishment, Nick. It's about saving lives, ours, and especially theirs. We need every piece of information, every morsel of truth that Michael holds. If you kill him now, the trail goes cold, and we lose our chance to bring Sharon and Phyllis home. The gravity of the situation pressed down on him, a relentless force urging him to choose the harder, more disciplined path of reason over the seductive lure of instant revenge. With a deep, shuddering breath, Nick lowered the gun slightly, his eyes locked on Michael's terrified face. The moment was a turning point, a crossroads where the path of retribution threatened to override the necessity of unraveling a larger, more insidious web of lies. His hands trembled, the cold metal now a bitter reminder of how closely the quest for justice could border on self-destruction. In that split second, every heartbeat, every drop of sweat, and every flicker of doubt played out like an eternity, as Nick fought against the raging tempest of emotions that sought to dominate his actions. Michael, for his part, was paralyzed by fear, each second stretching into an agonizing eternity. The threat in Nick's eyes was unmistakable, and every instinct in him urged escape. Yet, even as terror clawed at his throat, a part of him recognized that the path ahead was fraught with peril for everyone involved. The very foundation of their dark conspiracy was crumbling, and with it, any semblance of control Michael once had began to dissipate. In that fraught moment, the balance between justice and vengeance teetered on a knife's edge. Nick's inner voice, steeped in memories of pain and driven by the need to protect those he loved, whispered a warning that unchecked anger could lead not to salvation, but to a deeper descent into chaos. It was a battle of wills, of instinct versus reason, and as the seconds ticked by in heavy, oppressive silence, Nick felt the icy grip of responsibility and consequence tighten around him. Chance's intervention had saved the day for the moment, forcing Nick to confront the ultimate cost of his actions. The promise of immediate retribution was stripped away, replaced by the sobering realization that true justice required patience, restraint, and a willingness to endure the longer, more painful journey toward the truth. In that silent, charged space, Nick vowed to channel his seething anger into determination to unearth every secret, to peel back every layer of deception, and to find a way to rescue Sharon and Phyllis without sacrificing the integrity of his mission. And so, with the specter of Michael's panicked gaze still burning in his memory, Nick slowly lowered the weapon, his hands steadying as he took a final, resolute breath. The confrontation was far from over, and the dangerous dance between vengeance and justice continued to unfold in the shadows. But for now, Nick had chosen to hold back his rage, a decision that might very well be the key to unlocking the labyrinth of lies and ultimately reuniting his fractured world. In the tense silence that followed, the room was filled with the heavy realization that every decision, every fleeting moment of anger or restraint, carried the weight of countless lives. And as the faint sound of footsteps and murmurs of strategy drifted in from the corridors beyond, Nick's resolve hardened. He would not let his emotions lead him astray. Not now, not ever, because the only way to find the truth and save the ones he loved was to remain steadfast, even in the face of overwhelming fury. Thus, the night carried on, a silent promise of further revelations and inevitable confrontations, each one inching closer to the day when justice would finally be served and the lost souls of Sharon and Phyllis would be brought back into the light. Nick's eyes burned with a relentless determination as he prepared for the conversation that could finally unravel the tangled web of secrets surrounding Sharon and Phyllis. The stakes were higher than ever. If Michael were to reveal the precise location where Sharon and Phyllis were held captive, the nightmare could be ended swiftly. Yet, if Michael continued his act, painting himself as the innocent victim while concealing the truth, then punishment was inevitable. There was no room for another twist of betrayal, not after all they had already lost. In a shadowed back room far from prying eyes, the tension was palpable. Nick's voice was low and edged with anger as he faced Michael, who seemed to shrink under the weight of his own guilt. "Michael," Nick began, his tone measured yet brimming with suppressed fury, "this isn't just about you trying to play the victim anymore. You have the information that can bring Sharon and Phyllis home. Now is the time to speak the truth." Michael's gaze darted around, his eyes betraying a mixture of fear and desperation. He swallowed hard, as if the very words he needed to utter were lodged somewhere deep within him. I don't know what to say, he stammered, his voice cracking under the pressure. If I confess everything, it could end quickly, but then what? I'm terrified of what's waiting for me if I open up. His voice dropped to a whisper, laden with regret and exhaustion. It was then that Michael's plea came tumbling out, a raw, desperate cry for help. Victor, please, save me, he begged, the words trembling with fatigue. I'm so tired of living like this, trapped in my own lies. I can't continue pretending that I'm innocent when every day, the truth pushes me closer to the edge. His eyes pleaded for mercy, for someone to rescue him from the crushing weight of his own duplicity. Victor, who had been silently observing from the darkened corner of the room, shifted uncomfortably. He knew that the situation was far more precarious than anyone had anticipated. His mind raced with the potential consequences. If he and Michael were to confess everything, their carefully built empire could crumble overnight, and worse, they might find themselves behind bars. Yet, remaining silent was not an option either. Staying hidden in the shadows could invite attacks from rival factions, enemies who were constantly circling in search of vulnerabilities. Victor's thoughts were a tangled mess of fear and pragmatism, a deadly balancing act between self-preservation and the desperate need to keep their world intact. Michael, Victor finally interjected, his voice cool and controlled despite the storm raging within him. We both know that neither option is without consequence. Confessing everything might land us in jail, but your silence, your refusal to reveal the truth about where Sharon and Phyllis are being held, it leaves us exposed to even greater dangers. If you continue to play the victim, you're not just condemning yourself. You're putting everyone in jeopardy. His words cut through the heavy air, laden with the unspoken threat of retribution and the inevitability of a hard reckoning. Nick's jaw tightened as he listened to Victor's measured yet stern warning. The room was silent save for the low hum of tension, each second stretching out as if the fate of their entire operation hinged on the next word spoken. This is not something we can let slide, Nick said, his voice a blend of fury and sorrow. We've already suffered too much loss, and another moment of deception could cost us everything, even the lives of those we're trying to save. Michael's eyes flickered with inner turmoil. He knew that his fate was inextricably linked to the choices he made in that very moment. Every lie he had spun, every attempt to shield himself from blame, now lay before him like an insurmountable mountain of guilt. He felt the crushing pressure of responsibility, not only to himself but to every person who had placed their hope in him, the hope that Sharon and Phyllis might still be rescued from their nightmarish prison. Victor's gaze softened for just a heartbeat, as if remembering a time when the stakes weren't life and death. Michael, listen to me, he said quietly. We're at a crossroads. You either come clean and help us end this madness, or you continue down this path of deceit and risk not only our freedom but the lives of those we care about. You have the chance to fix this. Do it for them, do it for everyone. The weight of Victor's words, combined with Nick's steely resolve, seemed to reverberate in the small room. Michael's breathing became erratic as he closed his eyes, struggling to reconcile the fear of punishment with the desperate need to rescue Sharon and Phyllis. His inner voice, battered by years of secret schemes and relentless pressure, cried out for an end to the torment. With a trembling hand, he reached for the phone, a symbolic gesture that meant he was ready to break the silence. At that moment, every eye in the room was fixed on Michael, waiting for his decision to shape the next chapter of their precarious existence. Nick's hand still hovered near the grip of his concealed weapon, the promise of swift justice barely contained by his steely determination. Yet, even his hardened exterior was tempered by the realization that any rash action now could jeopardize the fragile hope of reuniting with Sharon and Phyllis. Time seemed to slow as Michael's eyes fluttered open, the conflict within him laid bare for all to see. All right, he finally whispered, his voice choked with both regret and reluctant resolve. I'll tell you everything, but you have to understand, I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing this so we can end the nightmare and bring them home. His voice was a mere breath, but it carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken promises. Victor's expression was unreadable, a mixture of relief and trepidation, as he realized that this could be the turning point. Nick's gaze remained fixed on Michael, his expression stern yet not without a flicker of cautious optimism. The room was charged with the possibility of change, the potential for a resolution that had long been obscured by lies and half-truths. "Now," Nick said, his tone resolute, "I want every detail, the location, the security measures, everything. There's no room for mistakes. One false move, and all of us pay the price." Michael nodded, his eyes brimming with fear and determination as he began to divulge the secrets that had haunted him for so long. Outside the room, the world of danger and betrayal raged on, but within that dim, heavy space, the seeds of redemption were finally being sown. The conversation, charged with the dual promise of justice and retribution, set in motion a chain of events that could either liberate Sharon and Phyllis from their captivity or plunge them further into a vortex of despair. And as each piece of the puzzle was revealed, the truth, no matter how bitter, emerged as the only path toward reclaiming the lives that had been so cruelly torn apart. In that fragile, pivotal moment, Nick, Michael, and Victor were bound together by the stark reality that choices made in the shadows could not be undone. The specter of retribution and the looming threat of imprisonment were ever-present reminders of the high stakes they faced. Yet, amidst the fear and uncertainty, there flickered a fragile hope that, with the truth finally out in the open, there might be a way to bring the lost souls back into the light and rebuild a future from the remnants of their shattered past. And so, as Michael continued to detail the hidden location and the intricate security measures that kept Sharon and Phyllis captive, the room seemed to pulse with a cautious optimism, a realization that, despite the looming dangers, there was a chance to end the cycle of betrayal and retribution. The conversation was not merely about uncovering a secret, it was about reclaiming the future and ensuring that the past, with all its painful mistakes, would no longer dictate the fate of those who still dared to hope. In the end, it was clear that the only path forward lay in a delicate balance between truth and caution, between justice and mercy, a balance that Nick, Michael, and Victor would have to navigate with every ounce of their strength if they were to rescue Sharon and Phyllis and finally put an end to the nightmare that had haunted them for far too long.